There's a specific kind of silence that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like a barricade. You know the feeling. The sudden sharp urge to delete the apps, block the numbers, and retreat into a fortress where no one can reach you. It isn't an act of cruelty, though the world often sees it that way. It isn't a tantrum or a bid for attention. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the sound of a circuit breaker finally snapping because the current was simply too heavy to carry. If you were the person who has mastered the art of the clean break, if you have walked away from friendships, family, or lovers without a backward glance, you aren't a monster. You are likely someone who has been fighting a private war for so long that your only remaining strategy for survival is disappearance. We call it cutting people off, but in the quiet of your own mind, it feels more like an amputation, removing a limb to save the rest of the body. You do it because you've reached the point where the cost of staying is higher than the grief of leaving. You do it because, for you, silence is the only thing that feels safe. But why does it come to this? Why is it that for some, a simple conversation about a boundary feels impossible, while a total exit feels like the only logical conclusion? To understand the psychology of the cutter, we have to look past the act of leaving and look at the invisible wall that was built brick by brick long before the final goodbye. We live in a culture that fetishizes closure. We are told that we should talk things through, that we should give people one more chance, and that walking away without an explanation is ghosting or avoidant. But for the person who cuts others off, closure isn't something you get from another person. Closure is the click of a lock. It is the moment you realize that no matter how many words you use, you are not being heard. Psychologically, this behavior often stems from a phenomenon known as emotional erosion. Imagine a shoreline. A single wave doesn't destroy the cliffside. It's the 1,000th wave, the 10,000th wave, the constant rhythmic wearing away of the foundation until one day the earth simply gives way. When you cut someone off, it's rarely about the last thing they said. It's about the 500 things they said before that, the subtle dismissals, the microaggressions, and the way they made you feel small in ways you couldn't quite articulate at the time. You didn't leave because of a single storm. You left because you realized you were drowning in a shallow pool, and the person standing on the bank was watching you struggle without reaching out a hand. For many, this pattern is rooted in a history of hyper-independence. If you grew up in an environment where your needs were a burden, or where expressing hurt resulted in being mocked or ignored, you learned a very dangerous lesson. I am the only one who can protect me. When a child realizes that their caregivers cannot or will not attune to their emotional distress, the child develops a false self. They become the easy child, the quiet child, the child who needs nothing. But that child grows into an adult who views intimacy as a trap. To you, needing someone feels like handing them a weapon they will eventually use against you. When a conflict arises in a relationship, a securely attached person might think, I should tell them how I feel so we can fix this. But for the person prone to cutting others off, the internal dialogue is very different. You think, if I tell them I'm hurt, they will argue with me. They will tell me I'm too sensitive. They will make me feel crazy. And then I will still be hurt, but now I will also be exhausted. So instead of fighting, you go quiet. You begin the process of internal decoupling. You stop sharing your day. You stop making jokes. You withdraw your spirit from the relationship until the only thing left is a ghost. By the time you actually cut them off, you have already been gone for months. This is the invisible wall. It is a psychological defense mechanism designed to prevent further disappointment. If I don't let you in, you can't hurt me. If I leave first, I control the ending. There is a strange, cold power in being the one to walk away. It is the only time you feel like you have agency in a world that has historically made you feel powerless. But there is a specific type of pain that comes with this. It's called ambiguous loss. When someone dies, there is a funeral. There is a collective acknowledgement of the ending. But when you cut someone off, there is no ritual.
there is only a void. You are left with the memories of the person they used to be or the person you hoped they would be, clashing against the reality of who they actually were. You find yourself mourning people who are still alive, walking the same streets, breathing the same air, but who are effectively dead to you. There is also the weight of the self-fulfilling prophecy. When you cut people off to protect yourself, you inadvertently reinforce the belief that the world is an unsafe place. Every person you remove is another piece of evidence that no one stays, or people always let you down. It creates a sterile environment, clean, safe, but desperately lonely. You become the king or queen of a kingdom of one. Many people who cut others off suffer from what psychologists call complex post-traumatic stress disorder. In this state, the nervous system is perpetually stuck in a fight or flight response. But there is a third option: fold. When the pressure of a relationship becomes too much, your nervous system decides that the situation is a threat to your survival. Your brain doesn't distinguish between a social disagreement and a physical predator. It simply screams, exit. This isn't a logical choice, it's a biological mandate. You feel a physical sense of relief the moment the connection is severed, a rush of oxygen to the lungs that you didn't realize you were missing. But that relief is often followed by a crushing guilt. You see the messages, you hear from mutual friends that the person you left is confused, hurt, or angry. You want to explain, but the words feel like lead in your mouth. How do you explain to someone that their very presence has become a trigger for your deepest insecurities? How do you tell someone that you've spent so many years being fine that you no longer have the energy to be anything else? We have to talk about the threshold of tolerance. Everyone has a bucket. For most people, the bucket is relatively empty, allowing them to take on the stresses of daily interaction. But for those who have experienced trauma, the bucket is already 90% full. You are walking through life with only a tiny sliver of space left for other people's drama, their mistakes, or their demands. One small thing, a forgotten text, a sharp tone, a perceived lie is enough to make the bucket overflow. To the other person, your reaction seems dramatic or out of nowhere. To you, it is the final straw on a back that has been breaking for decades. This is why the cutoff is so absolute. It has to be. If you leave a crack in the door, you fear the person will push their way back in and fill your bucket back up to the brim. You aren't just cutting them off, you are cutting off the version of yourself that existed when you were with them, the version that was small, compliant, and hurting. You are trying to kill the pain by killing the connection. But as you sit in the silence of your newly cleared life, a haunting question begins to circulate in the back of your mind. You wonder if you are actually healing or if you are simply building a more elaborate cage. You wonder if the peace you feel is the peace of a garden or the peace of a graveyard. You look at your phone, at the names that are no longer there, and you realize that while you are finally safe from being hurt, you are also, for the first time, completely unreachable.